Natomiast to, co mnie niepokoi, jeśli chodzi o ten raport, to nie są wcale ich podróbki, to nie są ich samoloty, ani ich atak na surowce, a to jest zdanie z raportu, które Państwu zacytuję, iż należy spodziewać się w ciągu najbliższych kilkunastu lat ataku nowego rodzaju wirusa. Państwo pamiętacie epidemię AIDS z lat 80., która dziesiątkowała Amerykę i Afrykę głównie. Pamiętamy także z historii, co robiła dżuma, czarna choroba, która zdziesiątkowała Europę do tego stopnia, że ludność Europy zmniejszyła się o 1/3. No więc autorzy tego raportu przestrzegają, że w ciągu najbliższych kilkunastu lat, przed 2030 rokiem, należy spodziewać się właśnie nowego ataku, nowego rodzaju wirusa, który zaatakuje i spowoduje śmierć, i to jest cytat, wielu milionów ludzi w każdym zakątku świata w ciągu 6 miesięcy.
As the coronavirus continues to spread across China, other nations around the world are starting to increase their precautions. Just a short while ago, British Airways said it was suspending all flights to and from mainland China. That comes after the British government advised against all but essential travel to China.
5G fifth generation technology promises faster download speeds and conveniences that most of us have never dreamed of, but will also be blanketed with a new type of radiation called millimetre waves. Health experts are warning about the rising risks with a 5G rollout.
It's not been made clear to the public that 5G won't just be another number and letter on your cell phone. It requires an entirely new infrastructure of thousands of small cellular antennas to be erected throughout cities where it's going to be installed.
What would 5G infrastructure look like? Small cell antennas could be placed as close as every third hydro pole. Scientists from 42 countries are now warning their governments about the emerging health problems associated with wireless radiation. And Canadian doctors and scientists have added their voices.
The most prevalent symptoms include headache, fatigue, decreased ability to concentrate, tinnitus, irritability, and insomnia. Impacts on the heart and the nervous system are also of great concern.
Dr. Rena Bray has been working at the Provincial Environmental Health Clinic for 15 years and seen the number of people suffering adverse effects from electromagnetic exposure rising.
We are concerned that the upcoming introduction of 5G will significantly increase the proximity and extent of exposure to microwave radiation in Ontarians. We predict that the number of people who develop the symptoms I just mentioned will rise in the places where 5G is first installed.
Dr. Magda Havas is internationally recognized for her research on the biological effects of electromagnetic pollution. She said that at high intensities, these waves cause intense heat and pain because sweat glands on the surface of our skin act like mini antennas.
At lower frequencies, scientists are predicting damage to eyes, loss of insect populations which are already declining, antibiotic resistance in bacteria, and physiological effects on the nervous system and on the immune system.
Radiation from radio frequencies is classed in the same category of carcinogens as lead. One advisor to the World Health Organization said there's enough evidence that if they were to re-evaluate radio frequency radiation,
it would be placed in class 1, i.e. a human carcinogen, and governments could not possibly ignore that.
Some say the scientific debate about the health effects of microwave radiation is over, but the question remains, can we afford to take this risk? Medical doctors are requesting delayed deployment until testing can be conducted on the long-term biological effects of 5G technology.
5G is a weapon. It's used by the military. Do you know these 5G millimeter wave technologies are used to scatter crowds? You know, they drive up in this technology when they want to scatter a cloud, and they put out these frequencies.
The world is aching for this information, and they're looking for answers to all these problems in the world. Are you feeling that more than ever?
Oh, big time. I was looking around and observing people and observing events, and it was very clear that although there was not this vast number of people that were saying, oh, there's a conspiracy or whatever, they were uncomfortable about the world. They were uncomfortable about what was happening. They couldn't articulate why they were uncomfortable, but they didn't like it. they felt uneasy about it. And so I started out on this speaking tour to basically say to those people, this is why you're feeling uneasy, because this is why these events are happening. They're not random, they're happening by actually long planned design. And when people hear another explanation of the world, which instead of presenting the world as a series of random dots, but actually connects them and says that's happening because of that, and that's happening because of that, and that's connected to that, and that's connected to that, and this is where they're all leading us, it's extraordinary to see the lights go on, and people go, and actually this makes far more sense than what I've got from the mainstream media. So it is a time of great challenge, because this thing is moving, not least into the technological level of control. But, there's such a difference between what you see in the mainstream, what you see coming from people who dominate the microphones, and what you get when you talk to people in the general population, that they do not see life the same way. Not least because the more they observe the real world that they're told to believe in, the less sense it makes, the more ridiculous it is. So there has to be other explanations, and people are more open to them. 5G is a weapon. It's used by the military. Do you know these 5G millimeter wave technologies are used to scatter crowds? They drive up in this technology when they want to scatter a cloud, and they put out these frequencies in a much higher power than 5G will be initially with us, but the same frequencies. And people scatter because they get the feeling their skin is on fire. Because the human body, including the skin, is an antenna. It interacts with frequencies, and it receives and transmits information. At the cutting edge of understanding of DNA, scientists know that DNA is a receiver-transmitter of information. And so we are electromagnetic, electrical organisms, transmitters and receivers of information. When our electromagnetic fields are in balance and harmony, we have health. We have psychological health, and we have physical health. The reason that this technological society is causing so much psychological and quote, physical disease is because these frequencies, technologically driven, and we live in this Wi-Fi world now and all the phone masts and all the rest of it, these technologically generated frequencies are scrambling the balance of the human electromagnetic electrical communication systems. And if you scramble them, you create a state of disharmony, dis-ease, which plays through to physical and mental, emotional, psychological dis-ease. I say this to kids and anybody else. How long could you live without your smartphone? And then ask, what is an alcoholic? Well, an alcoholic is someone addicted to alcohol. Yeah. Why is he addicted to alcohol? Because he can't stop drinking it. Yeah. But you can't put your phone down. And if you do, within a few minutes you pick it up again because you're addicted to it. So are you controlling that bit of technology in your hand, or is that controlling you? That's controlling you. So do you want your life controlled by a bit of technology? Do you want the rest of your life controlled by it? Or are you now going to go, I'm putting this down? The brain processes information electrically. It communicates with the cellular structure electrically. And it operates within a certain band of frequency. If you can broadcast frequencies carrying information, this technology has long been known, carrying information and perceptions within the frequency that the brain decodes information, the brain will decode those frequencies and will have those perceptions. you can externally, even without connection to AI, although that's the piece de la resistance, if you like, that's the kind of holy grail. But even before that, you can influence people's perceptions externally by broadcasting these frequencies that we interact with, because we are antenna. If technology is going to be the servant rather than the governor, it has to serve the interests of humanity, and humanity does not have to serve it. We're in a situation now where humanity is serving technology. And it will be serving AI. Increasingly, it is serving AI in its algorithmic expression. Every thought, every emotional response is a frequency. It generates a frequency, and it is of itself a frequency. Hate is a frequency, and it's different to love. You know, when you are in a room and there's lots of aggression and conflict and hatred, you feel it. What do people say? Oh God, you can cut the atmosphere with a knife in there. That is because the frequencies of hate and conflict have been so generated, they have changed the electromagnetic field of the room.
Okay, so 5G is going to be weaponized against us potentially.
Yeah, but the point being that they worked out the frequencies of various emotions, including rage and what have you. And basically, they can play across a community these frequencies without anyone knowing, and it starts to have an effect. And you find there is very, very little that won't wait till you're on a landline, and you can have a proper conversation with someone without this burning your brain and without you constantly on it, because
with concrete measures we can take to prepare for an influenza pandemic. Today, I'm announcing key elements of that strategy. Our strategy is designed to meet three critical goals. First, we must detect outbreaks that occur anywhere in the world. Second, we must protect the American people by stockpiling vaccines and antiviral drugs, and improve our ability to rapidly produce new vaccines against a pandemic strain. And third, we must be ready to respond at the federal, state, and local levels in the event that a pandemic reaches our shores. To meet these three goals, our strategy will require the combined efforts of government officials and public health, medical, veterinary, and law enforcement communities, and the private sector. It will require the active participation of the American people. And it will require the immediate attention of the United States Congress, so we can have the resources in place to begin implementing this strategy right away. The first part of our strategy is to detect outbreaks before they spread across the world. In the fight against avian and pandemic flu, early detection is our first line of defense. A pandemic is a lot like a forest fire. If caught early, it might be extinguished with limited damage. If allowed to smolder, undetected, it can grow to an inferno that spreads quickly beyond our ability to control it. So we're taking immediate steps to ensure early warning of an avian or pandemic flu outbreak among animals or humans anywhere in the world. The second part of our strategy is to protect the American people by stockpiling vaccines and antiviral drugs and accelerating development of new vaccine technologies. One of the challenges presented by a pandemic is that scientists need a sample of the new strain before they can produce a vaccine against it. This means it is difficult to produce a pandemic vaccine before the pandemic actually appears. And so there may not be a vaccine capable of fully immunizing our citizens from the new influenza virus during the first several months of a pandemic. To help protect our citizens during these early months, when a fully effective vaccine would not be available, we're taking a number of immediate steps. Researchers here at the NIH have developed a vaccine based on the current strain of the avian flu virus. The vaccine is already in clinical trials. And I'm asking that the Congress fund $1.2 billion for the Department of Health and Human Services to purchase enough doses of this vaccine from manufacturers to vaccinate 20 million people. I'm asking Congress for $2.8 billion to accelerate development of cell culture technology. By bringing cell culture technology from the research laboratory into the production line, we should be able to produce enough vaccine for every American within 6 months of the start of a pandemic. We must ensure that all levels of government are ready to act to contain an outbreak. We must be able to deliver vaccines and other treatments to frontline responders and at-risk populations. So my administration is working with public health officials and the medical community to develop effective pandemic emergency plans. We're working at the federal level. We're looking at ways and options to coordinate our response with state and local leaders. I've asked Mike Leavitt, Secretary Leavitt, to bring together state and local public health officials from across the nation to discuss their plans for a pandemic and to help them improve pandemic planning at the community level. I'm asking Congress to provide $583 million for pandemic preparedness, including $100 million to help states complete and exercise their pandemic plans now before a pandemic strikes. If an influenza pandemic strikes, every nation, every state in this union, and every community in these states must be ready. To provide Americans with more information about pandemics, we're launching a new website, pandemicflu.gov. That ought to be easy for people to remember. Pandemicflu.gov. The website will keep our citizens informed about the preparations underway, steps they can take now to prepare for a pandemic, and what every American can do to decrease their risk of contracting and spreading the disease in the event of an outbreak. To respond to a pandemic, members of the international community will continue to work together. An influenza pandemic would be an event with global consequences, and therefore we continue to meet to develop a global response. We've called nations together in the past and will continue to call nations together to work with public health experts to better coordinate our efforts to deal with a disaster. Now, all the steps I've outlined today require immediate resources. Because a pandemic could strike at any time, we can't waste time in preparing. So to meet all our goals, I'm requesting a total of $7.1 billion in emergency funding from the United States Congress. By making critical investments today, we'll strengthen our ability to safeguard the American people in the awful event of a devastating global pandemic. And at the same time, we'll bring our nation's public health and medical infrastructure more squarely in the 21st century.
I live very close to a very large tourist area in the United States, right by the coast. And during the summertime, there was no geoengineering stratospheric aerosol spraying here. About 2 weeks after school started, they started hammering us with this daily. First they were doing it in the middle of the day, then they started doing it at night and early in the morning. About, the beginning of October, my daughter started having seizures, and we have no history of seizure disorder in my family.
Oh, Michelle, I'm sorry to hear that. Well, Michelle, you can pull it up. Just type into the search engine disorder.
BBC recently did a radio documentary in which they exposed that the Great Flood at Lynmouth in 1952, when they had 250 times the rainfall, and it created this massive wave of water that came through the village, killing 35 people, was actually done by the RAF. They called it Operation Cumulus, also Operation Witch Doctor, and it was manipulated on purpose as an experiment on weather manipulation. It's been going on that long and earlier. Here is a US Air Force document, 1996. It describes the artificial creation of floods, hurricanes, droughts and earthquakes, and continues. Weather modification will become a part of domestic and international security and could be done unilaterally. It could have offensive and defensive applications and even be used for deterrence purposes. The ability to generate precipitation, fog, storms on Earth, to modify space weather, and the production of artificial weather all are part of an integrated set of military technologies. Now, of course, most people will now be bloody aware, my God, were we bombarded this year or what, with chemtrails, not contrails which disappear, condensation trails, chemtrails that don't disappear if they come out the back of these bloody aircraft. They stay around and they come out and eventually drop to the earth, and they have strontium, they have aluminium, they have barium. It's acidifying water, it's acidifying the land, and it is causing tremendous impacts on human health. Cumulatively, again, the coal. But it's doing something else. In the HAARP patents and specifications, etc., in the description of a researcher describing and summarizing what it said this: dispersed metallic particles such as aluminium, barium and strontium, the main chemical ingredients of chemtrails, or ingredients of chemtrails, may increase the atmosphere's conductivity and therefore enhance HAARP's weather modification performance. So it's doing that as well. So where am I going with this? Well, I'm going here. Dr. Richard Day, 1969, the weather will be modified and used as a weapon of war to create drought or famine. A weapon of war against who? In Agenda 21 terms, a weapon of war against the small farmers, landowners and growers of the world, not least in America. We have had in America this massive drought this year, which has devastated small independent farmers and growers. Of course, the big bloody corporations can cope with it.
Ciągnij was sąd.